Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today we're going to India to talk about the Ganges River, but we're also talking about some organization that's trying to clean up the river.
Yay!
And it's called Help Us Green. So the Ganges is getting a little greener with Help Us Green. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, because I've seen this river, and it's considered to be one of the most sacred rivers for people. They like to go in there and wash themselves. It sort of blesses them. And oh, it's so dirty. So I'm really happy to hear this. It's very hard in India. They have so many people. There's a lot of poverty. And so one of the things that you always notice with poverty is just uncleanliness and dirt and, they've got more important things to worry about, like getting enough to eat. So we're going to talk about a great foundation, a group that has come together to help these folks clean up that river, which sounds wonderful.
It does indeed sound wonderful, so let's find out what this is all about, everybody. Let's read the entire contents of our lesson now one time. The Ganges River is one of India's most sacred rivers. Personified and worshipped as the goddess Ganga in Hinduism, the river has historical connections to the nation's old capitals and is a lifeline to the millions of Indian citizens who live along it. However, the river's waters are rife with pollution from sewage and industrial waste. Another surprising source of this pollution is actually organic in nature: flower offerings. When visiting a Hindu temple, it's common to see statues of gods like Shiva ornamented with hundreds of colorful flowers. Temples along the Ganges elect to dispose of these flowers in the river to protect the offering's sanctity. However, as the flowers rot, the pesticides and other toxic chemicals used in their growing process leach out. These harmful chemicals poison groundwater sources, and the waterways they pollute have been linked to diseases such as cholera and hepatitis. The problem became evident to Ankit Agarwal when he observed flowers being dumped into the river during an important festival. Knowing something had to be done, he and a friend Karan Rastogi launched Help Us Green in the city of Kanpur. Agarwal wanted to take the flower waste polluting the river and flower cycle it into new products. At first, the two struggled to convince temples to donate their flower waste. However, their idea finally took off, and they began collecting used flowers, which are treated, cleaned, and sun-dried to make chemical-free incense, compost, and more. In addition, the company has given stable, safe employment to more than 170 women who previously had no work or had worked in sanitation. While the Ganges has a ways to go before it can become the clean and consecrated river Indians hope for, Help Us Green is certainly making a difference.
Okay, guys, we're talking about the Ganges River, which is located in India. It's a very special river to them. They're especially, or to people who are Hindu and believe in that religion. So they're trying to get it cleaned up because it was kind of dirty. A lot of people go over there, and not a lot of care is taken. So this group that's called Help Us Green, and notice there are no spaces between those words. It's just one long word. Help Us Green. I'm used to reading words stuck together now because of Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I will capitalize the first letter of each word, so it's a little easier to read than just using the first word capitalized, then all lowercase. That's kind of hard to read. So if you're doing hashtags, guys, here's a little tip. Hashtag and then initial cap or capitalize the first letter of each word. It's much, much easier to read. So the Ganges River is one of India's most sacred rivers. If something's sacred, it's holy. it's connected with people who believe in God, or the Hindu believe in different kinds of gods. And it's usually dedicated for religious purposes. People show something that's sacred a lot of respect. And if they don't, they're usually kicked out because people take their sacred things and areas of their world very seriously. So even if you don't believe what they believe, you still need to be respectful.
Right. For example, the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem is sacred to Jews. And there, of course, are many other sites in the Middle East that are sacred to people of different religions. So, of course, in India, the Ganges is considered a sacred river and personified and worshipped as the goddess Ganga in Hinduism. The river has historical connections to the nation's old capitals and is a lifeline to the millions of Indian citizens who live along it. Okay, so here we've got the word personified as a verb. To personify just means you represent somebody in human form. So in other words, people consider the river as a person. They consider it as the goddess Ganga in Hinduism. I hope I said that. I don't want to insult any Hindus among our listeners here, but that is one of the goddesses in Hinduism, the religion mainly of India. There are Hindus on Bali, the island of Bali in Indonesia, and in other parts of the world. And, of course, the river is not only sacred, but it is historical because it has flowed through lots of cities there, old capitals. And Indian citizens who live next to the river consider it as a lifeline. In other words, they depend on their living for that river, or at least they depend on the river for their living. Maybe they, use it as transportation, they get fish from it, or whatever. It's very important in their lives.
Yeah, so the river's waters, however, you could put the however there too. You could say, however, the river's waters, or the river's waters, however, are rife with pollution from sewage and industrial waste. Such a shame, but that happens to a lot of rivers. If something's rife with something, guys, it's negative. Know that first of all. You can't use it for a positive idea. It just says there's something really undesirable that's widespread, or there's a lot of it. I could say the streets of Chicago are rife with violence. They have lots of murders in the city of Chicago. So, yeah, if you have something bad there, or the city of San Francisco is rife with drug addicts, people who are hooked on drugs. So, yeah, rife, make sure you remember, though, you can't use it to talk about something that's positive, that is widespread. It has to be negative. Here we've got sewage. Sewage is the wastewater that usually comes from your kitchens, your toilets. Yeah, you don't want that in the water. They bathe in this water, Yeah. I've seen it.
Sounds gross.
And industrial waste is very dangerous. It's these companies that are working with very strong poisonous chemicals, so they're not good for human beings, and that is going into the river as well.
That's right. So some people are trying to clean up that river. Another surprising source of this pollution is actually organic in nature, flower offerings. So, of course, here something organic is something that comes from living things, basically from plants, in this case, flowers. So it's organic. You probably have heard of organic vegetables grown without artificial ingredients, without pesticides or fertilizers and stuff like that, organically grown. So here, these are flowers. They're organic. They're living things. You wouldn't think of flowers as being something that pollutes water.
No.
What a surprise. That's why we're saying it's a surprising source of this pollution. It is flowers, but more specifically, it is flower offerings.
Yeah.
Now, if you're religious, of course, sometimes you go to the temple or the church or whatever, and you bring something with you to leave there for the temple or for the gods or goddesses who are in that temple. Here in Taiwan, in Taoist temples, people leave offerings all the time. They leave food? Like oranges or apples or whatever. Those are offerings. And I guess in temples in India, they leave flowers as offerings.
That's nice. Yeah. So when visiting a Hindu temple, it's common to see statues of gods, their gods that they believe in, like Shiva, ornamented with hundreds of colorful flowers. I bet that's pretty. If you ornament something, it could be a noun, guys. An ornament we put on our Christmas trees. We put lots of ornaments. It's countable. But here it's being used as a verb. If you ornament something, you make it prettier. You make it look better by adding something special to it. Here we're talking about the fact that these statues that are probably a little plain until people bring their offerings, and that's when they cover these statues with beautiful, colorful flowers. So temples along the Ganges elect to dispose of these flowers in the river to protect the offering's sanctity. Now, I understand where this thought comes from. You know, they think the Ganges is sacred, so that river is sacred. They're taking those offerings to the gods, which are considered sacred as well. They're offerings from your heart. They're just putting in the river, but now those flower offerings are making the river even more, clogged and dirty and not good. So when you talk about something's sanctity, it's how holy it is, it's how sacred it is, or saintly. Sanctity of something. So we always talk about the sanctity of human life. We believe that life is very precious, so you'll often hear or read that phrase, the sanctity of human life.
I guess you could substitute the word purity, but sanctity means it's holy in nature, so they want to protect the flowers because they are sacred, because they are holy in nature. However, as the flowers rot, the pesticides and other toxic chemicals used in their growing process leach out.
Oh, yeah.
So, of course, when you throw the flowers in the river, they're going to rot. They're going to decompose and become more elemental material. So, of course, when the flowers were grown, they sprayed pesticides on those flowers and maybe used fertilizer and things like that. So, these are toxic chemicals, which are poisonous. They're bad for people. They're bad for animals. And pesticides, of course, are chemicals designed to kill insects. Insects, of course, like to eat plants. We don't want them eating our plants, so we want to kill the insects but keep the plants so we can eat them and sell them and stuff like that. But unfortunately, there's still residue from those pesticides on the flowers and also the fertilizers, which are toxic chemicals. They leach out. In other words, they kind of come out of the flowers in the river and then they pollute the river.
Yeah, if it's leaching out, it's kind of a slow process, and it's usually a chemical or a mineral that's draining away from something or coming out of something. Yeah, that doesn't sound good. These harmful chemicals poison the groundwater. And the groundwater is what they use to get their drinking water. Remember that. And polluted waterways, rivers, canals, those are all waterways. They're linked to diseases such as cholera and hepatitis. Cholera isn't found in America anymore. It's only found in underdeveloped countries, but it's really infectious and often fatal. It's a type of bacterial disease, and it gets into your intestines, inside.
Oh, no.
And it usually comes from infected water. And you just vomit, you have diarrhea, and then they usually pass away. Hepatitis is still all around the world, including the U.S., and you get it by different ways. Dirty needles if you're a drug addict, or I don't know. There are different ways to get hepatitis. Sometimes a blood transfusion will give it to you if the blood's not completely clean. And what it is, it's the inflammation of the liver. So right now, guys, it's about time to take a break. We're going to listen to our Chinese teacher, and then we'll be back.
大家好，欢迎收听 English Digest， 我是哈利。今天我们要阅读的文章是 Unit13 The Ganges gets a little greener with help us green。 提到印度 India， 我们会想到什么呢？相信除了咖喱以外，还有印度最神圣的河流恒河 The Ganges River。 我们来看第一段的倒数第二句。 However, the river's waters are rife with pollution from sewage and industrial waste。 然而，这条河的水域充斥着污水和工业废料的污染。形容词 rife 的意思是 very common and often bad and unpleasant， 也就是指充满的、充斥的，通常用来指不好的事物。例如 Corruption is rife among this country's politicians. 这个国家的政客间充斥着贪污。片语比 rife with something 是指充满或充斥着不好的东西。例如 The air in this area is rife with factory exhaust. 这地区的空气充满了工厂废气。恒河的污染源除了污水和工业废弃物之外，还有供奉给寺庙的花朵。我们看到第二段的第一句 When visiting a Hindu temple, it's common to see statues of gods like Shiva, ornamented with hundreds of colorful flowers. 参观印度寺庙时，常会看到像是湿婆的神像，装饰着数百种五颜六色的花卉。本句使用了感官动词的句型，感官动词例如 see, watch, look at, hear, listen to, feel 或是 notice 等，加受词再加受词补语。如果是主动语态的话，受词补语用现在分词 VING 或原形动词。如果是被动语态的话，受词补语用过去分词 VPP。例如 After parking his car, David heard someone honk their horn behind him. 大卫在停车后听到有人在他后面按喇叭。按喇叭是主动语态，所以用原形动词。我们再看一个例句。Seeing her favorite doll broken by her brother, Anna cried bitterly. 看见自己最爱的娃娃被哥哥弄坏，安娜痛哭着。娃娃被弄坏是被动语态，所以我们用过去分词 broken。我们接着看到第二段的第二句 Temples along the Ganges elect to dispose of these flowers in the river to protect the offering's sanctity. 本句用了一个动词片语 dispose of 是指 get rid of something that you no longer need or want, 也就是丢弃、清除的意思。Those who dispose of their household garbage here will be fined. 在这里丢弃家庭垃圾的人会被罚款。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
What do you say we continue with our lesson, everybody? And I suppose you're wondering, where does this company come in? Help Us Green. Where do they come from? Where do they come in? How are they going to clean up the river?
What are they doing?
And what are they going to do about all those flowers that are leaching chemicals into the sacred Ganges River? Well, this problem became evident to a person by the name of Ankit Agarwal when he observed flowers being dumped into the river during an important festival. India, of course, is a wonderful country with lots of festivals, things to check out, great food, great music and stuff like that. So, of course, if you're fortunate enough to go to India during a festival, it's quite an experience to check out. But unfortunately, during those festivals, they dumped these flowers into the river, and Ankit Agarwal was there during a festival, and he saw that those flowers were being dumped into the river. And this problem of the flowers leaching those chemicals into the river became evident to Ankit Agarwal. So here, evidence just means clear, obvious. He could see with his own two eyes that this was happening and that it was a problem.
Well, knowing something had to be done, he didn't just sit back and wait for others to fix the problem. He stepped up and tried to help. He and a friend, Karan Rastogi, launched this new company called Help Us Green in the city of Kanpur. So that's what they decided to do. If you launch something, you start it. We often use this verb to talk about a new company getting its start. Oh, they launched a new charity that is going to focus on pollution. So they launched this to try to help the city themselves, which is really great.
Indeed. Okay, so of course he knew something had to be done, so he and a friend, Karan Rastogi, launched Help Us Green in Kanpur. Now, Agarwal wanted to take the flower waste polluting the river and flower cycle it into new products. Interesting, they kind of made a new word there.
He's very creative.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got, of course, we know the word recycle, which means to take garbage or things like plastic bottles or paper or whatever and reprocess it and use it again. So here, flower cycle, that just means to recycle flowers, basically. That's what Agarwal and his company want to do. Now, at first, the two struggled to convince temples to donate their flower waste. So, of course, they got this idea. Yes, we can't throw those flowers into the Ganges. We need to do something with those flowers so they don't pollute the river. So they went to temples and they said, hey, can you give us your flowers? We'll treat them so they don't pollute the river. And the temples were kind of skeptical at first. Well, we're not quite sure if that's the right thing to do. We want to preserve the sanctity of those flowers. We still want to dump them in the river. We don't want to give them to you. But I guess later on they were able to convince the temples that it was the right thing to do.
Cool. So at first, they did struggle, as Tom said, to get those temples to participate by donating their flower waste. However, their idea finally took off, which means it got started and was becoming more popular among those temples, and they began collecting used flowers, which are now being treated and cleaned and sun-dried to make chemical-free incense, compost, and more. So you know what the incense is, that scented substance that is burned at temples. It's a familiar smell to me. When I first returned back to Taiwan this second time, I just remember thinking, oh, there's that smell. I don't smell incense in America very often. Now, compost is something that is really popular now where people take, their leftover scraps of food and they keep them in some sort of container and they kind of break down over time. It becomes decayed. And then you can use it as a fertilizer for growing your plants. My sister and her husband do this in their backyard. He's into composting and they have a small area of plants. And after a while, that leftover food scraps like, fruit and vegetables, not meat, of course, just fruits and vegetables, they then can take it and use it as fertilizer. So there are no chemicals on the plants they're growing. So this is all good stuff.
Indeed. So that's what they're doing with these flowers here, converting them into incense and compost and other things. And in addition, the company has given stable, safe employment to more than 170 women who previously had no work or had worked in sanitation.
Awesome.
So, of course, he's giving some employment opportunities to some women there in India. They previously were not working. They were unemployed. Maybe they were housewives and did not have jobs. Or they worked in sanitation. Sanitation is a job in which involves cleaning up after other people, basically.
Trash.
Cleaning out toilets or taking out trash and stuff like that. Nobody really wants to do that, but somebody has to.
Thank goodness somebody does it, yeah.
Indeed, we need to be grateful to the people who do that.
We love our sanitation workers in Taiwan who ride around in those musical trucks. We love them.
They are friendly people, actually. But in any case, yes, indeed, these people worked in sanitation, so now they're working for this company here. And while the Ganges has a ways to go before it can become the clean and consecrated river Indians hope for, Help Us Green is certainly making a difference. So, okay, while the Ganges has a ways to go, if we say has a ways to go, that means it still has a lot of time. It still needs a lot of time to improve, okay? So, for example, maybe you bought an old house, but it's kind of broken down, and you could say, well, this house has a ways to go until we can actually live in it. We need to do some work on this house. Right now, nobody can live in this house, but we need to work on it and restore this house. It has a ways to go. And just like that, the Ganges River has a long way to go, you could also say that, before it is clean and before it is a consecrated river that all Indians hope for. Consecrated here is another word for sacred or holy.
It's interesting, yeah. Notice there that this has a ways to go, but you could say has a long way to go. Don't put the S on way if you're going to say a long way to go. They're both correct. If something's consecrated, guys, it means it's been dedicated or devoted to some sort of holy or sacred purpose. Usually, things that are consecrated are things that are found within religion, churches, or these synagogues, or even the mosques. So this is great. They've got to do some more work, but you're seeing some progress being made, and that's really a hopeful thing for everybody, especially those folks who live by the river. Right now, we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher one more time, and then we're going to wrap up.
意识到供奉的鲜花会污染恒河的问题，这两个人决定创立 Help Us Green 来处理这个问题。我们看到第3段的第4句 At first, the two struggled to convince temples to donate their flower waste. 起初，两人努力说服寺庙捐赠他们的废弃花卉。动词 convince 是使确信、使相信的意思。Convince somebody to do something 就是指说服某人去做某事。例如 Kevin was reluctant at first, but his friends finally convinced him to go camping with them. 凯文起初不愿意，但他的朋友最后说服他跟他们去露营。Convince somebody of something 是指说服某人相信某事。The suspect failed to convince the judge of his innocence and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. 这位嫌疑犯未能说服法官相信他的清白，被判入狱3年。我们接着看到第3段第5句有一个动词片语 took off。Take off 在本句是受欢迎、成功的意思。例如 Peter's business has really taken off and he hopes to expand it overseas. 彼得的生意的确成功了，他希望能扩展到海外。另外 take off 还有起飞、脱掉、休假等意思。例如 Judy took a week off from work to go on vacation in Japan. 朱蒂工作请假1星期去日本度假。以上就是今天的课程，谢谢大家收听。
That brings us to the end of our program for today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure you join us again next time for another edition of our program. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
See ya.